Hey, it's Pete, and welcome back to Question Christ. And today we're going to do question number 3 from Michael Discusses video. Out of the 15 questions he asked me, this is number 3. If the Bible has been around for thousands of years, how did we know that people didn't add their own stuff in or take stuff out of the Bible? Okay, it's a good question. It basically breaks down to the reliability of the text of the Bible. Let's start with the Old Testament. The first writings we had from the Old Testament came from about 900 AD. That was way past the time that they were written. In 1947, there was a boy who was playing out in the deserts near the Dead Sea. He was throwing rocks around, and he threw a rock into the mouth of a cave, and he heard something break. Okay, so he went in to check it out, and he found all these jars, one of which he broke. And what he found in there was absolutely amazing. Basically, the whole Old Testament, minus the book of Esther. I don't know why Esther got the shaft, but minus the book of Esther. And these copies were dated between 150 BC and 70 AD. So there was about a 1,000-year difference between these two copies. They were basically virtually identical. So that to me points to the idea that, oh, there's all this time and people changed it and stuff like that. For the Old Testament, I think that shows an amazing amount of authenticity and reliability to the text. So now let's move over to the New Testament. When it comes to the New Testament, we have a wealth of text, somewhere between 25 to 30,000 pieces of text. Now that might not mean much to people, so I want to put that in context. When it comes down to the second runner-up in writings of antiquity, that would be Homer's The Iliad. Now, Homer's The Iliad has only 643 copies. So you have somewhere between 25 to 30,000 copies of New Testament writing. Second runner-up, The Iliad, 643. The next runner-up, somewhere around there, is Caesar's The Gallic Wars. 10 copies of that. The Bible, especially the New Testament, has way much more textual wealth, I would say. There's so much of it. And I also think that speaks to the monumental impact that Christ had through the first few centuries. Okay, it was spreading like wildfire. Okay, and it was written in so many different languages. We have 6,000 Greek, 10,000 Latin, 10,000 to 15,000 of other languages. So, I mean, it was just spreading like wildfire. A lot under persecution. That's the other thing we have to remember, that, Nero was out persecuting Christians. There was tons of copies that were burned, but we still have that much. It's absolutely amazing. So that's the amount that we have. Now let's go into dating. When it comes to our runners-up, the manuscripts of Tacitus that we were talking about, those two copies are 800 to 900 years away from the original time that Tacitus wrote them. Then you have Caesar's Gallic Wars, 900-year gap between when they were written and the earliest copies we have. Homer's The Iliad, 1,000 years from the original time that Homer wrote it. Now let's go to the New Testament. We have 4 nearly complete New Testaments from the 4th to 5th centuries. Okay, so that's 400 to 500 years. We have 30 pieces that date from late 2nd to early 3rd centuries that contain good chunks of entire books, 2 of which cover most of the Gospels and Acts and the letters of Paul. That's 200 to 300 years away. And the oldest we have is a scrap of papyrus that contains John chapter 18 verses 31 and 33 and 37 and 38, which is no more than 40 years from John's writing it. So again, there is nothing in ancient writing that comes close to the dating, the earliest dating, than the New Testament. I mean, again, head and shoulders, nothing comes closer. Nothing's questioned about Caesar's writings or Tacitus's writings or Homer's writings. Most of these are studied in school, not questioned. But then you have something that is written so close to the original time. and is put in the question. You have to ask why that is. So the last question we have is, how accurate is the Bible? What I'm about to tell you is going to be kind of shocking to you. But by some estimates, there are over 400,000 variants in the New Testament. Now, most people would say, wow, how can you have any trust in this document with that many variants? The question is, what constitutes a variant? Most of the variants are mistakes in spelling, some grammar mistakes. If you, instead of using an "an," or instead of using an "a" instead of an "an," something like that, and you multiply that mistake by thousands of times, and you have 25 to 30,000 pieces of manuscript, you can see how that can just blow up very quickly. There are a few that are that have been found not to be in the very original, the earliest documents that we have, and then show up a little bit later. The two big ones is the woman at the well story, the woman caught in adultery, that one. Those without sin cast the first stone. And the other one is the ending of Mark. But even if you took those out of the Bible, it would not change the articles of faith of the church. It wouldn't change of who Jesus said he was. It wouldn't change anything about the basic tenets of our faith. These are all documented very clearly in any Bible that you open up today. If you take all those into account, still, without controversy, there is 98% of the New Testament that has absolutely no question from any scholar about it, about the authenticity of it. So, and the majority of the rest of them are small, minor grammatical errors. And, then there are the few passages that I just mentioned that are obviously addressed already and that affect no article of faith. So the question I would have to ask is, if I told you there was an ancient writing, that we have an abundance of text, manuscript from it, 25 to 30,000 pieces of it, and I told you that we had these writings, some of the writings that we have are the earliest dated writings to the time that they were written, the copies that we have, than any other ancient writing. And I said that even though these writings were written 2,000 years ago, there was 98% that had no question of authenticity about their content. Would you trust in that document? Would you say, well, that would be accurate? I would place faith in that. Now, I'm not saying that you believe what it says, but your question was, how do we know how reliable it is? So I hope that the stuff that I presented shows you that. One other thing, there are so many writings from the early church fathers in these first early centuries. If you didn't have the New Testament and you were just taking the quotes that these early church fathers made of the New Testament, you could basically reconstruct the whole New Testament. So anything that has any questions of context or what does that mean or is there any question, can very easily, you can go back to those early church fathers and kind of like, mirror them off each other. So it's an excellent way, checks and balances. There's a gentleman by the name of Sir Frederick Kenyon. He's a New Testament authority. He wrote this: the number of manuscripts of the New Testament, or early translations from it, and of quotations from it in the oldest writers of the church, is so large that it is practically certain that the true reading of every doubtful passage is preserved in some one or other of these ancient authorities. This can be said of no other ancient book in the world. So, that's my presentation why I think the Bible's reliable. I hope that was helpful, Michael, and I'll be working on number 5 as soon as I can. Have a good day.